KOIN 6, your local election headquarters. This is the debate for Oregon's Secretary of State.
Good evening and welcome to Oregon's Secretary of State debate here on KOIN 6. I'm Jeff Gianola, your host and moderator for this evening's debate. For the next hour, we'll be asking the candidates your questions submitted by viewers at KOIN.com, covering a wide array of topics. In keeping with recommended health guidelines, we are physically distanced tonight in our KOIN 6 studios. Everyone's spaced at least 10 to 12 feet apart. As you might expect, we'll also be skipping the traditional handshakes between the candidates. Now let's introduce you to your Secretary of State candidates. State Senator Kim Thatcher, the Republican Party, and State Senator Semia Fagan of the Democratic Party. Thank you both for joining us tonight for the next hour. We know this should be beneficial to your constituents and voters all across the state. A little more about your candidate. Senator Kim Thatcher is based out of Kaiser, representing District 13, and has held that position since 2014. Senator Thatcher has held office in the state capitol since 2004 as a state representative before her election to the Senate 6 years ago. Senator Semia Fagan represents District 24, which includes southeast Portland and parts of Multnomah and Clackamas County. Her career in Salem began as a state representative of the 51st District from 2013 through 2017. Senator Fagan was elected to represent Senate District 24 in the 2018 midterms. Now, also joining us tonight are panelists. KOIN 6 political reporter Lisa Balick is with us, and Lisa has covered the Capitol for more than a decade now, and Peter Wong with the Salem Bureau Chief of the Pamplin Media Group, including the Portland Tribune. Now, Peter's been covering Oregon politics in Salem for 35 years. He's seen it all. They each have great insight and experience, and they will be asking several questions to our candidates throughout the night. So thank you both. We'll check back with you soon. Here are the ground rules for tonight's debate. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to questions. Their opponent will have 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Following last week's interruption-filled presidential debate, people have been clamoring for hosts to install mute buttons or cut microphones. We will not be doing that tonight. Instead, we trust our candidates to respect the guidelines in order for us to have a productive debate to help you at home make your very important decision. Before we begin, it's important to recap the recent history of Oregon's Secretary of State office. Currently, it's the only statewide position held by a Republican. In Oregon, there is not a lieutenant governor, and the Secretary of State is second in command behind the governor. In 2016, Republican Dennis Richardson was elected as Oregon's Secretary of State, flipping the typically Democratic-held office. In 2019, Richardson passed away after a battle with brain cancer. Governor Kate Brown appointed Republican Bev Clarno to fulfill Richardson's term with the stipulation that she would not run in 2020. And that brings us to tonight. So without further delay, let's begin the debate. And our first question, Senators, the Secretary of State is Oregon's chief elections officer. If elected, you would be responsible for keeping the state's voting process secure. President Trump has repeatedly attacked mail-in ballots and tells the American people that voting by mail is highly susceptible to voter fraud. Oregon was the first state to adopt vote by mail. Do you agree with the president that vote by mail is plagued by fraud? If so, how can the system be improved? And that first question, we start with Senator Thatcher.
Well, thank you. No, I think that Oregon has a very good system in place. I think it would make a lot of sense to do a top-to-bottom review and make sure that we're not leaving ourselves open to any problems whatsoever, and keeping our vote-by-mail process above board. And people just have to have, you know, they have to have confidence in their elections. They have to have just know that people are working to give us the best process possible. And so that's what I would do. I would kind of look at it like a white hat hacker and just kind of look at every step of the elections process and make sure we don't have any problems. And if we do, then respond to them and deal with them. I don't necessarily agree with the president. I think Oregon has a very good process in place, and Oregonians really appreciate vote by mail.
Senator Fagan, the same question.
Well, Oregonians can be very proud of our vote-by-mail system. I've actually never voted any other way, And I don't often quote conservative think tanks, but the Conservative Heritage Foundation actually looked at Oregon's vote-by-mail system since 1998, looking at over 15 million ballots, and found 14 instances of voter fraud. So we know that our elections are secure. We use a paper trail for all of our ballots. We have a unique barcode tracking system to record when folks' ballots have been received. We have forensic signature verification, and we have offline ballot counting. So Oregonians can be very sure that our vote-by-mail system here is secure, and encourage other states to actually follow Oregon's lead. Let me be clear that claims of widespread voter fraud, whether by the president or anybody else, are a myth. And they are a myth spread by people who want to make it harder for certain groups of people to vote.
Okay, let's get to our panel right now. KOIN 6's Lisa Balick and Portland Tribune's Peter Wong standing by. Lisa, let's begin with you. Your first question, and which candidate do you direct this to?
First question here will go to Senator Thatcher. In Oregon, you have to be registered for this election by October 13th, which is the day before ballots get mailed out. Would you want the law to be changed to allow people to register to vote up until and on Election Day?
I was around in the 80s when the Rajneeshis were around, and they were trying to change the outcome of an election by importing a whole bunch of people into a small town. And so I guess I'm not a fan of same-day voter registration. I would rather look at opening up voting in a different way. And there are small communities and small counties around our state, and there have been attempts by groups to try to push an election one way or another just by overwhelming the system, and that's not something we want to have happen. So I would really rather we kept the system that we have in place, where we register to vote ahead of time. And right now, you reminded us all that October 13th is the last day to register to vote, and to also change your address. If you are one of those displaced voters who needs to have your ballot forwarded, make sure you do it by then.
Senator Fagan, you have a 30-second rebuttal time.
Right. Well, as someone who grew up in Wasco County, I was there during the Rajneesh-Purim, and the reality is moving the voter registration deadline up is not going to prevent people that would want to do harm. Yes, we should have same-day voter registration, particularly for our primaries. There are so many Oregonians out there who are not registered as Democrats or Republicans, but they may see a candidate they want to vote for in the primary, and yet they can't change their voter registration. So I do support same-day voter registration for both primaries and the general election.
Peter, your question to Senator Fagan.
All right. Thank you very much. I have personally met 11 of your 12 predecessors, and some of them became governor, and some of them ran for governor, and some of them, of course, did not run for governor. My question, however, is which Secretary of State would you model yourself after, or which Secretary of State do you admire the most, and why?
I think I have the most parallels with Senator Mark Hatfield, and actually who also was our state legislator. Then he was Secretary of State, and he was governor, and then of course he was Oregon's U.S. Senator. I'm actually currently rereading his autobiography, and the core of his message is that people are not Democrats or Republicans. They're people. And I think as somebody who grew up in a Republican household in Wasco County and an evangelical church in the Dalles, I think that I've been able to live that value, to, despite my political party or somebody else's political party, to be able to continue to see people as people, to be able to see people that ultimately sit around the kitchen table and often talk about the same issues and aren't divided at the kitchen table by party registration, and therefore shouldn't be divided here in Oregon either. So I would certainly be proud to follow in the footsteps of Secretary of State Mark Hatfield.
Senator Thatcher, you have 30 seconds.
That's an easy one for me. Secretary of State Dennis Richardson. I think he raised the bar in that office quite a bit. I would like to follow in his footsteps. He saw this office as a managerial and nonpartisan office where you listen to all Oregonians, you run fair elections, you don't stand out there tooting the horn for one of the teams while you're refereeing the elections. It doesn't seem very fair. But you also listen to all Oregonians, and you will look at issues and audit them regardless of what Is my time really up?
That's okay. I'm giving you the. Go ahead and
Okay,
finish
all
your
right,
thought.
thank you. Regardless of it being a Republican issue or a Democrat issue or what, it's just Oregon issues, and those things need to be looked into to make sure our government is running as well as it can, that we are serving people in the best possible way.
Okay, Lisa, your next question, and who you're directing it to.
Yes, Senator Thatcher, a follow-up to this line of questioning here. Do you favor lowering the voting age to 16? There's been discussions in the past in the state legislature about this.
You know, it's an interesting discussion because I also serve on the Judiciary Committee, and we've talked a lot about brain development and as it pertains to juvenile justice and how we don't want to punish youth that have done certain things for too long because their brains haven't been developed yet. So it's kind of interesting now that we want to bring in, you know, talk about 16-year-olds voting and 17-year-olds voting. I think right now it is okay for them to register to vote. And, you know, as far as weighing in on issues that affect a county or a city, that's, you know, I guess that would be up to the legislature, and I would try to make that run as well as I can as the Secretary of State. I just think that we need to think carefully about how we implement something like that.
Senator Fagan, your 30-second rebuttal.
Actually, this question would be up to Oregon voters. The constitutional age for voting is set in the Oregon Constitution, so it would take a referral perhaps from the legislature or voters gathering signatures to actually change the voting age in Oregon. You know, when I was out knocking on doors for my 2018 campaign, it was during the Parkland shooting, and people were very impressed. Oregonians were impressed with these young people holding President Trump and Marco Rubio's feet to the fire. And whether they can vote or not, I think it's important that we recognize how gun violence and climate change and housing insecurity and income inequality really affect Oregon's young people today and stand up for them whether they can vote for us or not.
Okay, let's get to another question right now. Campaign finance reform has also been a very top issue. Measure 107 on the upcoming ballot would limit the amount of money donated to campaigns. As of now, Senator Fagan, you've raised more than $1.4 million for your campaign, including a $50,000 donation from Governor Kate Brown's Political Action Committee. Senator Thatcher, you've raised about $532,000 for your campaign. Despite this discrepancy, you do both support Measure 107. So, Senator Fagan, let's start with you. Why do you support limiting campaign finance donations?
Well, because this is what Oregonians want, and it's what I want. Nobody should be able to buy a microphone so big that they drown out everybody else. The problem right now is that we need to actually overhaul our entire campaign finance system so that everybody is playing by the same rules. I'm proud in this campaign to be supported by a broad coalition of folks, including over 1,500 individual donors. Some folks give me $1. In fact, many people have given me $1. I think that's important that we have a broad base of support, and I am proud of the support that I've received in this campaign. I think the question you're really asking is, will folks be independent? And absolutely, I've actually been the lone no vote in my party on more than one occasion. I'm actually in the Senate because I defeated an incumbent Democrat, and I worked with Republicans to pass the National Popular Vote Compact over the objections of the 3 most powerful Democrats in the Senate. And we need campaign finance reform so that everybody can show that kind of independence.
Senator Thatcher, I'll give you a minute on this important question as well.
Well, thank you. Yes, I have supported the ballot measure that got sent to the voters because I think that Oregon voters are very much in the mood for campaign finance reform. They're really tired of there being so much money going into campaigns and so much spending being had on that. Now, having said that, I really appreciate the transparency part. I want people to know where money is coming from. And when you have unaccountable groups getting together and creating a fake website to make it look like they're neutral when really they're in the tank for one of our voters, which my opponent was a proud recipient of that type of campaigning during the Democratic primary, I think that is wrong. And I also think that whatever voters decide on campaign finance reform, I will put together a citizen commission to implement it in the best way possible and get recommendations.
Senator Fagan, 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, sure. I mean, primary campaigns are tough, and what my opponent is referring to is that some of my primary opponent's supporters didn't like a website that my supporters put together, but all the information on that website was accurate, and the media has reported that all of the campaign finance was accurately reported in our system. And of course, Kim knows that because I'm sure she reads the news. This is the kind of misinformation that we need to get away from in our politics, somebody saying something directly different than what's actually been reported by the credible news media.
Let's get to our panel right now, and Peter, we'll start with you this time. And who are you directing your question to?
Senator Thatcher first. There was a Secretary of State when she was in the legislature voted against mail balloting, but as Secretary of State, she carried out the law. Now in 2015, you voted against the new motor voter law, which uses driver license applications to register voters automatically unless they opt out. If you are elected Secretary of State, do you believe you can carry out that law faithfully?
Absolutely. The legislature put that in place, put the motor voter program in place. I have yet to see that it's actually increasing voter participation rates. However, that is the law, and that's absolutely something that I would be looking into as Secretary of State to make sure the interface and the communication between those systems are working properly and that people are being registered properly and able to catch those little cards that come in the mail that say, hey, you're registered to vote, you're nonpartisan right now, would you like to change your party? And then they have so many days to send it back. Absolutely, that is the law, and that's how I would implement it. I would not change a thing on it other than maybe improve it and make sure it is working as it should.
Senator Fagan, 30-second rebuttal.
Sure. One of the first times I stepped foot in the Secretary of State's office was actually with then Secretary of State Kate Brown and voting rights advocates to map out this path to automatic voter registration. But this is a good example of a difference between Senator Thatcher and myself. I don't believe that voting rights should be a partisan issue. In fact, while the automatic voter registration that I strongly supported here in Oregon, sadly, Republicans voted against it in Oregon. The good news is, since then, across the country, it's been spread to over a dozen jurisdictions, and now Republican legislators and Republican governors have supported it and signed it into law.
Back to our panel, and Lisa Balick with your question.
Yeah, first question for Senator Fagan. You're supported by hundreds of thousands of dollars of union dollars, especially public employee dollars, at a time when there's growing calls for changing the public employment retirement system. How does that not buy influence in the decision-making that a Secretary of State makes, such as in audits of state agencies?
Well, I'm proud to be supported by a broad coalition of people, environmental activists, women's organizations, and I'm also very proud to be supported by hundreds of thousands of working people across our state, including the firefighters who are out fighting wildfires across our state right now, our teachers who are struggling through virtual school, our nurses who are on the front lines of this COVID-19 crisis. And they support me for a simple reason. Throughout my career, I have believed that everybody should be paid a living wage. They should have health insurance. They should have retirement security. They should have sick leave to take paid time off when they or their family members are sick or welcome a new child into their home. And they should have a say in the safety of their workplace. That's why I've received the support of union and non-union workers all across the state. But it's actually a misconception that public workers don't want to be audited. Many of these public workers give the best information to state auditors because they've been making the same complaints to their supervisors for years, and nobody listened until a state auditor came by.
A 30-second rebuttal, Senator Thatcher.
Well, thank you. I think the Secretary's premier job is to serve as a check and a balance on the executive branch, and that would include all the programs that are run. I just think that it is kind of telling that there's so much money being poured in from unions, public sector unions especially, when, you know, that is not money that is actually being given purposely for a Secretary of State race or any particular race. It's being put into a pool and then being sent on by the managers of the unions.
We want to get to some of our viewer questions tonight. We'll get back to our panel in a moment. And this is an important question. Conducting audits, you just mentioned it, a key role of the Secretary of State. Now, Jean from Portland asks the following. Secretary of State Richardson conducted several audits of departments in the state of Oregon. Many results found needed attention and showed money was an item of concern. Are these candidates going to continue these audits and correct the errors in budgets? Jean, thank you for that question. Senator Thatcher, let's begin with you.
Well, thank you. Yes, the Secretary of State can do audits. It can turn rocks over, figure out what's there underneath, and show people and make recommendations. As far as correcting the budgets, that is up to the legislature. That is up to the governor's office to make the changes that are recommended by the auditors within the agencies. And finally, there is the dots have been connected between the recommendations that are made by the good auditors and the agencies that are being audited, where they have to come in to the Legislative Audits Committee, which I've served on for a long time, and they say when they're going to adopt the recommendations and how they're going to adopt it, whether they agree or they don't agree, and then they give their reasons. But as far as changes and making sure those recommendations are followed up, that is absolutely something the Secretary of State can do and keep up with and let the world know if they're not being followed. But those changes in budget, et cetera, need to be made.
And since this is
another branch.
And since this is a viewer question, Senator Fagan, you have a minute.
Thank you. You know, Jean, audits are the best tool the Secretary of State has to make sure that our policies reflect Oregon values. And I know firsthand the impact on a family when public services don't work. Like the broken healthcare system that left my mom battling addiction for most of my life, or a housing crisis that pushed my family in and out of homelessness. But I also know what is possible when public services work, like the Oregon schools and educators that changed my life. That's why I'll audit the Oregon Employment Department, find out what went wrong so this never happens again. I'll audit our emergency response, not just responding to COVID, but responding to these wildfires to make sure that Oregonians are never left behind. There is no one in this race more committed than me than making sure that public services work best for the people in Oregon who need them the most.
Let's go back to our panel. And Peter, your question.
Senator Fagan, now that you've brought up that topic, Senator Thatcher and her in the last appearance that you had together indicates on specific areas she wants to look at. You just indicated a couple. Could you be a little more specific about what you would like to see the auditors do? And Senator Thatcher, you've made some comments on this previously, but you get another chance to elaborate on your priorities in the audit division.
So go ahead.
Senator Fagan first.
Yes. So the audits division is important because we actually can do a systematic review to make sure that the policies and your tax dollars are actually accomplishing the goals that you support, that support Oregon values. As I've mentioned, one of the first audits that I will do is of the Oregon Employment Department. It's just unacceptable that thousands of Oregonians who've paid into this system, some of them their entire working lives, and this is the first time they've had to use it, and suddenly those checks weren't there. And I was proud to be the only one here who supported both a moratorium on evictions and a moratorium on foreclosures, but there's no moratorium on your groceries. There's no moratorium on paying the child care or the babysitter or putting gas in your car. So I think it's absolutely critical that the next Secretary of State audits the Employment Department, not only finding out what went wrong, but why weren't the previous audits followed? Why weren't those recommendations followed through on? I'll find out what went wrong and make sure it never happens again.
And Peter wanted to direct that same question to you, Senator Thatcher. So I'll give you a minute on this.
Well, thank you. Yes, on Secretary of State Dennis Richardson's audit plan, he had the employment division on the schedule to be finished up with an audit last year. And I called them out and said, why is this not happening? Instead, they came back with a management letter early this year because of the COVID. And now they are undergoing an audit with the Employment Department. Thank goodness, because we've got to get that figured out so it never happens again. Yes, there was money allocated. They should be able to update their systems and all that. But specifically, I want to look at the challenges that are facing Oregon right now and try to use that office to help get Oregon back on track, whether that's the COVID response, the small businesses being shut down, the education that is not quite open up to our kids yet, the civil unrest, management of our forests, the wildfire response. These are things that can be looked at that can help inform some policy decisions at the legislature, as well as budget decisions.
Lisa Balick.
A question for Senator Thatcher. With the agencies that we're talking about, the audits and all, with the financial situation the state is in right now, would you, if you were Secretary of State, spend money out of other budgets within the Secretary of State's office and expand the audits of state government agencies to find money?
Oh, very good question. Thank you. I actually want to use the Office of the Secretary of State's Audits Division to help inform budget decisions and to be of assistance when it comes to figuring out our budget, because we are facing some very tough budget decisions right now in the legislature. And I think the Audits Division can be of great help in finding those things that are most important to Oregonians and finding maybe some areas where perhaps we can, put it on the shelf for a little bit and keep those important programs moving forward. Everybody wants to make sure that education's working well. Everybody wants to make sure that people have that safety net to fall back onto. Those are important things that we need to keep up with, and we don't want to be, causing problems for Oregonians. We want to reduce that, and that's what the Audits Division can help do.
Senator Fagan, 30-second rebuttal.
Yeah, I think that with the declining revenues, with a recession, with wildfire recovery, the Secretary of State's going to have to work with the resources that she has and not be able to expand that office. But the good news for Oregonians is we have an extraordinary audits department, an audits director, and many, many professional auditors right now who follow the national professional auditing standards. And they're going to do their work even in the midst of a budget crisis. And I would argue specifically in the midst of a budget crisis, because now more than ever, we have to make sure that our scarce revenues are going to make a difference in the lives of people who need them most.
Okay, I think Lisa has a follow-up question.
Yes, Senator Fagan, to start, what cuts would you make in the Secretary of State's budget right off the bat to save money?
What cuts in the budget?
In the Secretary of State's budget, if you were Secretary of State. Where would you find belt tightening that could be done right away?
Right. Well, first off, I don't know there are going to be budget cuts. There won't be budget increases, but I'm not sure there'll be budget cuts. In fact, redistricting is on the docket this year, and it looks as if the next Secretary of State may need to be directing the redistricting and actually directly involved. And so that's money the legislature has already allocated, whether the legislature or the Secretary of State does that. But if you're looking for budget tightening in Oregon government, I would definitely want to perform an audit of the Oregon Forest Resources Institute, which the OPB and the Oregonian reported has essentially been spending your tax dollars to actually lobby on behalf of the timber industry, counteract and Oregon university scientists, and really essentially audit on or lobby on behalf of private companies. And so that's one place that I would do an audit where we could probably save Oregonians a lot of money.
Senator Thatcher, 30-second rebuttal.
Where would I cut? Well, if there had to be cuts, I would definitely consult with the agency department heads. We have the audits, archives, business, and ballots that the Secretary of State's office deals with. So I would work with the leaders of those particular divisions and make sure that we're, doing the least harm to the budgets.
Okay, another viewer question, and these are important. And once again, this is from Stephanie in Clackamas, but once again, she wants to know, how does each candidate expect to maintain a neutral stance on any audit? So audits was a big issue with our viewers. So Senator Fagan, we'll begin with you. You have 1 minute. So how can a partisan candidate effectively run an independent investigation?
Well, I'm glad that the viewer questions were asking a lot about audits, because it is one of the most important roles of the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State, just to be clear, doesn't actually conduct the audits. She works with the director of the Audits Division, and then it's those nonpartisan folks who worked in the Audits Division forever that actually do those audits, and they follow national auditing standards. But I think the question that you ask is really important because it comes from a place of values. And as I mentioned before, I know what it's like for a family when public services don't work. And so I will be absolutely committed as Secretary of State, as I've been as a senator, as I've been as a member of the Oregon House, to make sure that Oregon government and Oregon programs work best for folks who need them the most. And one division that I know we're going to really need this next time is the Oregon Small Business Advocate that I helped create my first term in the Oregon House to make sure that our small businesses can get back up and running both after COVID and after these wildfires.
Senator Thatcher, you have a minute to answer that question. Once again, how can a partisan candidate effectively run an independent investigation?
Well, like she said, the auditors are professionals. They know how to do this. They work with a whole host of regulations and standards, and I expect that they would adhere to that. Now, I really admire how the Secretary of State, Dennis Richardson, had approached audits in that he was looking at things that you wouldn't necessarily think of as a Republican issue, like equity in Portland public schools, and kind of showing what the problems are in some of our schools and dealing with some of those issues that really need to be fixed. And then dealing with some of the concerns that were happening around North Portland, around clean air. And those are things that you just have to listen to Oregonians. I want to be Oregon's Secretary of State. I am not looking to be the Republican Secretary of State. And I think that's first and foremost as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I want to thank our candidates for this first half hour. That will wrap up the first half hour of Oregon's Secretary of State debate right here on KOIN 6. Remember, if you missed any of this debate, you'll be able to watch it in full on our website, KOIN.com. We'll be right back with our candidates after this quick break.